Buongiorno, ciao. Welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. This is the first Friday reads that I have done in a while. I was on vacation from the end of September until the middle of October in Italy. I'm not going to do a whole lot of photos and videos here. I had originally kind of intended to. I also really thought I might be posting some content while I was still in Italy, and I could kind of incorporate videos from like the bookstores that I visited into those. That ended up not happening. So all I will say is my Instagram account is always linked down below. So I have a highlight or two highlights on my profile on Instagram that have the photos and videos and things from the trip. So if you want to check those out, please head there. It's going to be the easiest way. Lots to catch up on. I finished some books in September. Didn't read a whole lot while we were actually on the trip. And then I've read some books when we came back. And because this is my first Friday reads in a while, that means that there is a lot to cover in that. And I don't know if I'm going to say a whole lot about all of these books. I might save some of it for monthly wrap-ups. I don't know that I have a whole lot to say about some of them, but I do have a lot to say about other ones. But anyway, we'll get to that when we get to the actual Friday reads portion of the video. We'll get in a little bit just to like, I don't know if it's even like a channel update or something like that. Just some things I'm noodling on lately, and I don't really know what they all mean, but we'll get to that as well. The first thing is just the trip in general. It was great. It was amazing. It was very needed. It was so much fun. Italy was a dream vacation for us because it turned into a dream vacation because we have been intending to make this trip for over a decade. Joel and I met in 2010. Pretty quickly, we both settled on the idea that we wanted to go to Italy together. And for various reasons, it just never happened. Like if you've seen the beginning of the movie Up, it's like that. Stuff was constantly happening. You know, we were going to go in we started planning to go in 2012. We got engaged, started planning a wedding. After we got married, we moved to Montana. And then after we came here, we got dogs, and then we had a foster son. There's always a reason not to take the trip. And the timing was interesting, I will say, because and it's not interesting in a happy way, but we booked tickets and a lot of the tours that we were going to do in February. Part of the reason for that was that Guinness was diagnosed with a brain tumor last year, and between Christmas and New Year's we went to the hospital at WSU in Pullman, and they gave him radiation treatment, and in February he seemed to be doing great. So we felt confident booking tickets to be gone for 2 weeks. And then everything kind of went to hell after that. By, I think, the end of April, it was clear that Guinness was not doing well, and decline started from there, and we lost him in June. And, you know, we've all been navigating the grieving process for that. So suddenly the timing didn't seem great, but we decided to do it because Jamie seemed to be in a really good place. She's right here, you can see. Taking a nice little nap. It's actually really cold where I am right now. So we're here on the blankets with lamb chop, staying warm. I'm wearing one of my many Italian t-shirts that I got. You'll be seeing a bunch of them. This is from the Cinque Terre. At the bottom, it has the 5 cities that make up. The Cinque Terre is one of the places we went. Anyway, so the timing ended up being bad, but we decided to go anyway. And it was good. We needed to get away. Jamie did fine. So the fast forward through the trip part is that we ended up coming home a day early because as we headed into the last week of the trip, Jamie actually got sick. She developed a wet cough at the place where she was staying, and they took her to the vet. They found fluid around her lungs, and they put her on a diuretic to get rid of the fluid. The diuretic dehydrated her, so they had to go back and she had to get fluids. And she was doing okay, but then after that, we think she just got sad and lonely. So she started getting really listless. I mean, she wasn't feeling well as well, but, you know, she wasn't getting any better. So we talked to the woman the saint of a woman who was taking care of Jamie. And we kind of all unanimously agreed it seemed that she was lonely and would do better if Joel and I were home. So that was when there were only 3 days left in the trip. And we couldn't get a flight the next day. So we ended up coming home a day early, which was good. And she lost a lot of weight. She bounced back very quickly as soon as we got home, and she's been continuing to bounce back ever since. Her sweet little girl. There she is, being cute. And she's pretty much back to normal right now in terms of her personality. She's eating normally. She's putting some weight back on. And that is a little hard because she lost a lot of weight while Guinness was sick. And we had finally gotten her to a healthy weight. So now we're trying to build our way back up to that. So that part was stressful. It made the return trip stressful. I mean, the nice thing is, if there is a nice thing, we did everything that we had set out to do because there were 3 days left and we couldn't get home the next day. That was the last day that we had anything booked. So since we couldn't get home, we did that thing. It was the tour for Parmesan, balsamic, and prosciutto in Bologna. So we got to do everything that we had set out to do. It's just that our return trip ended up being more stressful. Not to get into the nitty gritty details of that, but but I'm glad we're home. Jamie has a heart condition. If you follow along, you're aware of that. Her cardiologist does not think there's any cause for concern. She had gotten a checkup a week before we left for Italy. That's one of the things that made us feel confident in going in the first place. And she got such a good diagnosis from that, and thankfully the doctor doesn't think anything has changed in regard to her heart. Her kidney function was a little low when they checked her levels while she got sick, so we have to take her back in 3 weeks. So please keep your fingers crossed for good news on that once that is rechecked. But in the meantime, she seems to be doing really well. So that's the Jamie side of the equation in the catch up from the trip. The trip itself was amazing. So we flew into Naples. We only spent one night in Naples, and then we went to Positano. We are under the Tuscan sun gaze, hardcore, for the movie, not the book. I actually am not a fan of the book. And I had this discussion with somebody, I think on Instagram. I'm much more of a fan of the movie than the book. They're very different. It's kind of like Nomadland, the book and the movie. They are very different entities. You can't take one for the other. But anyway, point just being, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. We're huge fans of the movie. And from that, we have always wanted to go to Positano. So we did. Amazing. Oh my God. The food is amazing. The city is amazing. The sights are amazing. You see photos of a place and you kind of think to yourself, well, I mean, this person probably put a filter on that. It doesn't really look like that. No, it really does look like that. It was amazing. Wonderful. I'm so glad we went and that it was good. It rained like the first day a little bit, but it was fine. We got to go to Pompeii, which was amazing. We went to a restaurant that had been featured on Stanley Tucci's show Searching for Italy, and it was a total disappointment, but that's a long story. But so that was an experience we got to do. We took a cooking class. It was just so great. We took a boat tour around the island of Capri. I can speak, which was a highlight of the trip for sure. Even though the water was really choppy, the guy who took us around the island was just a lot of fun and a really interesting guy. And just a great all-around experience. And then we went to Rome, where I got to see my cousin, who I haven't seen in a really long time. Because last time I saw her, she was in high school, and now she's graduated from grad school and living in Rome. So proud of everything she's accomplished. And we did a Vatican tour. We did a Colosseum tour. We walked around. We saw the Trevi Fountain. We discovered that the creepier the alley, the better the food. And just Rome is an amazing city because you turn a corner and you're constantly amazed by what you see. There is so much history going on. And I love that it's complicated history because the history of the world is very complex. And you see the way things have been kind of paid over. The Pantheon was one of our favorite things that we did. And my cousin had said, if there's only one thing I can convince you to do in Rome, it's the Pantheon. You have to do it. I'm so glad she said that because it was one of our best experiences. And you really see how this was something that was created. I don't know if it was a pagan specifically, but for pagan ritual, basically, or like a meeting place. And then once Christianity came in, it was completely retooled to be a sort of Catholic church. And the history is fascinating. And just the fact that the marble has all been taken down. The marble was taken off the Colosseum and then repurposed in different ways. So you see the ways history and the ebb and tide of who is in control has changed so much. From there, we went to Rio Maggiore, the Cinque Terre, and we explored some of the other islands, not all. I got to see a friend, Elena, who I haven't seen in a couple of years because I moved to Montana and she moved to Germany. So she actually came from Germany to meet us in the Cinque Terre. And it was just so good to see her. She's one of my best friends in the world. And it meant a lot to be able to see her. And it's one of those weird things as well where we knew each other when we were both single and living in New York. And who would have known all these years later we would be meeting in Italy, having moved to very different places and with our husbands. It was so much fun. We took a hike from Rio Maggiore to Manarola that Google Maps said would be 35 minutes and took an hour and a half. And we were all exhausted and sweaty and you go up a mountain and down. I don't know what Google Maps was thinking. So there is another path that's apparently a lot easier. Maybe that's the one it thought we were taking, but that was closed because of falling rocks. So we ended up having to do the hike over the mountain, and that was a lot. That was a lot, especially for someone who's usually out of shape. And I work from home, so you can imagine in Italy, my step count went from like this to like this. It was insane. From there, we drove to Bologna, and we ended up only having one night in Bologna. But it's a beautiful, stunning city. We visited this really great bookstore called Libreria Trame, Trame, with this owner named Nicoletta, who is just the loveliest person. We had a great conversation with her. I bought 3 books in her store. You'll be hearing about those in my book haul next week. And it was just a great experience. And that's where we were supposed to have a second night in Bologna, and we didn't because after the Parmesan Prosciutto Balsamic tour, we ended up hopping in. We took a quick nap and then hopped in a car by 7 p.m., drove back to Naples, which is a 6-hour drive. So we arrived in Naples at about 2 a.m. to drop off the rental car we drove, which was an experience. And not as bad. If you've driven in New York City, you're primed to drive in Italy. It's still very different. The driving is very aggressive and very intense. So you have to navigate for that and account for that. And it is an adjustment, but we did just fine. So, so we made that drive, and then we checked in for our flight, and then began the 23-hour flight process to get home. And that was something of an ordeal. My back has been killing me ever since, because we spent most of the second to last day in a car because the shuttle drove us around to the different parts of the tour. And then we drove from Bologna to Naples for our return. That's where we were supposed to have an extra day. We were supposed to do that drive at our own leisure the following day. And instead we had to just leave and do it all at once. And then the plane. And planes, I'm over 6 feet. I'm not built for planes as it is. So it was just really uncomfortable. So yes, life as a 40-year-old hit very hard. My back has been killing me since we got back. But it's been good to be home, and I'm glad we had the trip and the experience. And I'll leave it at that about the trip. It was a really great experience. I apologize I didn't. You know what? Actually, I'm going to be sorry, not sorry, that I didn't post anything while I was gone, because I really enjoyed the break. And that kind of naturally segues into the next thing, which is not really a channel update, but just, I'm having thoughts about my channel, how I operate, what the impact is. And I don't have answers, but because if I do make changes, it will impact you as subscribers, because the Friday reads are for community. The people who really follow along and are interested in all of this stuff. So for anyone who is in that basket of subscribers, it could potentially impact you and your experience. Like, the Friday reads are not going away. I don't plan on shutting down the channel, but I do need to change some things, and I don't really know what. And I think it's been, so the gist of it is, I feel like I'm hitting some growing pains with my channel, and I need to figure out what that means and what it means for me going forward. It's nobody's fault. It's not a bad thing. It's actually an extension of a good thing. At the end of December, I will have completed 4 years on book 2. In 4 years, I now have over 8,000 subscribers. And that I'm laughing because it's wild. I mean, I'm actually speechless. It is far outside of the realm of anything I would have expected when I started my channel at the beginning of 2019. If you told me, and actually I started it at the very end of December 2018, but I don't really count that because it's like there was 1 week left in 2018. So I count the beginning of 2019 as the beginning of the channel. But if you had told me then that in 4 years I would have more than 8,000 subscribers, I would be flabbergasted and probably think you are insane. It's great, but I will say I've noticed a difference lately in the experience of, I hate the term content creator, but I do create content on a channel and post it. But I have noticed that the experience of being a content creator has pretty drastically changed over the last 6 months as I approached and then went over 8,000 subscribers. And I think part of it is that I might have been better able to adapt more quickly under different circumstances. But I'll never know because these are the circumstances that I have. You know, it's been a tough year. I mean, perspective. It's been a tough year, couple of years for everybody. But the last year in particular for me and for Joel, it's been tough. Guinness got sick. Guinness is our baby. I'm going to try not to get emotional. I think of my dogs as my children. I take that very seriously. That's a hard loss. And it's going to take a lot of time to process that. I would love to be the type of person who could absorb the hit and keep going. I'm clearly not. It's going to take a long time. And I'm working on it. I'm trying to process the fact that Jamie was not well while we were gone and that she has a heart condition already that we could manage. Stress on top of that. You know, I take my role as a caretaker for them very seriously because, again, I consider them to be my children. So it's just been a rough year. I think that alone has meant that sometimes I feel like I don't have the capacity to and I think I was blaming my own emotional state, perhaps more than necessary for some of this. Like I'd get overwhelmed with the amount of comments, but then I'd take a step back as I'm on vacation and realize I get a lot more comments than I used to. So it's not just that, you know, mentally and emotionally, I'm not at capacity for what I would usually be able to manage, but there's a lot more. And it's not just current videos. It's a lot of videos all at once. So there are people who are commenting on new videos. There are people who are discovering old videos. Sometimes people discover your channel, they like it, they start going back and watching old videos from the beginning. And as they go through, they comment. And sometimes they watch like 5 to 10 videos in a day and they comment on them. And that's great, but it does mean that the comment feed for me has gotten to be a lot. And that's just kind of one example of it. That's manageable. I can figure that out. It's tough for me because the comments and the engagement is exactly why I want to be here. And it's one of the things that has gotten tough as the channel has gotten bigger. So I need to figure out how that works. There was just a bit of an awkward cut here. Maybe you didn't even notice it. Maybe you did. The camera's in a bit of a different perspective. So where I just left off, a little behind the scenes info, I got a call from work and then some more work things happened, and then my in-laws were going to be stopping by today, and they did. So about roughly 2 hours, maybe even more, has passed since I made that last comment, and now I'm finally getting back to the video, and Jamie is getting back to me. The good thing about that is that my in-laws had picked up a package from Montana Book Company for me for stuff that I had ordered and pre-ordered that came in. And 2 of those items are things that I read and I'm going to be talking to you about. So now I actually have physical copies of them to hold up, which is not essential, but fun. The bad part is totally interrupted my train of thought. And I was building momentum on what I was saying, and now I've lost all of it. And we're just getting into the part that's a little bit difficult to articulate. So obviously, as I said, where I left off, I watched the last minute of what I had said. The amount of comments has definitely increased, and it's become more difficult. And I had been blaming my own emotional state about my inability to sort of keep up with them. Turns out it is probably much more to do with the volume of comments that are coming in and the fact that they're not all coming in. And new videos, they're all over the place. And some people reach out to me on Instagram. I don't remember if I mentioned that. Some people don't leave comments on the videos. They'll send me a message on Instagram. I once had somebody send me, I did a tag video, and they sent me a message with all of their responses to the tag. And that's great. It's fine. I invite people to do that. But it just means that the volume of messages and the places where the messages are coming in, and that's adaptable. I can try to get used to that. It's hard for me though, because I want to respond to everybody. And because that's what I want and the engagement that I want, I put stress on myself when I'm not able to keep up with it. So the last month, 2 months, when I haven't been able to keep up adequately, probably longer, has been tough, and I've felt guilty about it. So I think maybe I need to feel less guilty, figure out ways to prioritize comments and, navigate through them a little bit better. I don't know. It's hard to find time in the day to get through all of them. And so I'm going to work on that. It'll get better. The part that's much more difficult to articulate is that, there's always been an element of negativity. There always will be if you create anything and post it on the internet publicly. It feels like the type of negativity has really changed as I approached 8,000 subscribers, and especially since I got over 8,000. It feels a lot more pointed and kind of mean-spirited and targeted. And that is going to be an adjustment as well. The negativity I used to get most often was more in the vein of I would say, I really like this book and I hope more people discover it. And there'd be one comment saying, well, I don't know why you liked that book. It was dumb. Okay, we disagree. It's fine. The type of negativity now is very different, much more personal, and a little more difficult to just swallow and move on from. And I'm going to have to try to navigate that as well. And some of it, not all. I talked to Sean the Book Maniac about this, and he was very helpful about it. So big thank you to Sean. Some of it is just simple management of stress. So there are some old videos of mine that particularly attract, I hate to use the word trolls, but negative comments that are really particularly mean-spirited and not helpful, and that I tend to just delete. Because I want to be clear, I don't just want positive comments on my videos. Negativity is fine if it's constructive or helpful. There have been a lot of conversations that have been really interesting, but when it's just mean-spirited, insulting, I just delete it because there's really no sense in engaging it. And there are a couple of videos that in particular that, two in particular, that I had mentioned to Sean as examples. And he suggested for those, since they in particular are causing this problem for you, just shut down the comment section. Because a couple of other people earlier in the week had said, well, if you have a comment section, you have to expect this. And, maybe if you don't like it, just shut down your comment section. And that's really not fair. Because first of all, I don't think just the fact that you post stuff on the internet publicly should mean that you have to accept abuse, insults, mean-spirited comments, anything like that. Of course, it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean you should just accept it and it's fine. And not to single anybody out, a couple of people on my Nobel Prize reaction said, you're really trying to explain yourself. Just say what you want to say with conviction and move on, and it'll be fine. And it's okay, cool. You're not the person who's going to be potentially getting hate messages on this video for years. I have found if you really try to explain yourself all around, what you're trying to say, why you're saying it, and anticipate what other people are going to say in reaction to it, because it's always the same thing, it's better. So, anyway, point just being, I feel like just because you post things publicly doesn't mean you should have to accept these things. And the sad thing is, those videos And I'm specifically talking about the Nobel Prize video where Peter Hanke won. They did two, one for Olga Tokarczuk and one for Peter Hanke. That one in particular. At this point, the only people who find that video are people who want to defend Peter Hanke. And it's exhausting. And they're mean-spirited. And again, I just really delete them. So the problem is when you turn off the comments, you lose all of the comments that already exist on the video. Anything that was like a constructive comment, anything that was celebratory about the wins, the good stuff, the interesting stuff all goes away along with all the toxic stuff. But it also closes off a valve or like a path that for people to send messages that are clearly like mounting, not productive, and I'm just deleting anyway. So I did turn that one off, and I turned comments off on another video as well. So it's something to navigate, basically. And it's hard because a lot of the time, the ways in which they're mean-spirited feel like targeted. And I told myself when I started a channel, I don't want to do it if I can't be myself. I don't want to do it if I can't advocate for things that I believe in. I don't want to do it if I feel like I need to censor myself for discussions, like present a version of myself that I can't. Like I feel like I have small channel energy in that way. I'm not polished. I don't want to be polished. So I don't know. It's tough for me. I want to be understood, and when people don't understand or kind of deliberately misunderstand or take things that you say out of context and spin it into something wild, it's a lot. And it happens a lot all of a sudden in the last 6 months. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this. And it's going to be interesting. And maybe I do less reaction videos. I mean, the problem is I like doing reaction videos to like the Booker Prize, the Pulitzer Prize, the Women's Prize. The New York Times is going to be doing its 100 notable books soon. Washington Post will be doing its top 10 books of the year. New York Times will be doing its top 10 books of the year. I like doing those videos. I don't like being called an idiot for doing those videos and not having read the books, because the point of me doing those videos is to go through the list, find the books that I'm interested in that I haven't already read, and maybe celebrate books that are on it that I have liked, bemoan books that are on it that I didn't like, and things like that. And, people get very personal about these things. And again, it's something that has really only been happening recently, but it's been ramping up fast and hard. So I need to adapt about that stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. Maybe I just do like Friday reads, because the Friday reads are the community things. It's for the people who follow, the other things tend to attract other people as well. I don't know. I don't know what it means. Maybe it also means I post a little less, and that's where it could impact people. Like I try to post 3 videos a week, and that's a lot, and it's stressful. So maybe I try to only post 2 videos a week, and one of those will be a Friday reads. I don't know. Maybe I do less reactions. Maybe I pick and choose the type of reactions that I do. I don't know. None of this has been figured out. Right, Jamie? And I'm just going to navigate it. So, but it might mean some changes in the type of content I create, the amount that I create it. Oh, it's really windy. Oh, there's a little kid on a bike. So Jamie might growl and bark. And there's the barking. They disappeared, so she's hopefully going to be calming down. And I want to try to wrap this up so I can edit it and get it scheduled. So I'm just going to talk over her. Hopefully it's not a big deal. And I don't say this for sympathy. I don't say this... I don't think of myself as a victim in this regard. I want to make that very clear as well. It's just an evolution that is coming from the channel growing. I really think that's just what it is. And I need to figure out how to adapt to it. It's going to be a new reality. Because clearly, if the last 6 months to a year are any indication, it's not going to go away. It's not going to get any better. So I either need to shut down my channel or shut off the comment sections, both of which I don't really want to do, or I just need to learn how to adapt to the new reality, because it's a lot and it's very different. So That's all. Don't need sympathy. Don't expect sympathy. It's just something that I'm going to navigate, and it might potentially change the outcome or output of the channel. So we shall see. All to be determined. Let's move into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video because I'm going a little bit long. So since we last spoke, I have finished 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books. And actually 3 of those were in the month of September. I did my September wrap up. We filmed it early so I could just schedule it for the day we left because we left for Italy on September 28th. So technically 3 of these books shouldn't be in my October wrap up, but they are falling into, I'm just gonna kind of slide them into it. I don't know how much I have to say about some of these books, but let's run through the 6 books that I have finished since the last time that we spoke. And the first one is Blackout, by 6 different authors: Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. So this is a collection of stories, kind of like an anthology. Basically, the premise is there is a blackout in New York City, and a bunch of teenagers are like late teens, early 20s. They're all sort of romantic in nature, but all of the kids are either on their way to a party in Brooklyn, or they kind of end up getting sucked into the party's sphere. And this is one that I did enjoy. I don't feel like I have a whole lot to say. There are parts of it that seemed like, that doesn't really make sense. And you just kind of have to go with it. Some of the stories are a lot longer and it come out in chapters. And some of them are just like short little bursts that come in between. This was something that was in the curated book box that I got from Betty's Pages. And like I said, I feel like it's a solid like 3-star read for me because it's fine. There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing good about it. And that is not a knock on Betty's Pages because it was an enjoyable read. I'd say it's just not, not great, but enjoyable and very good. So I'd still recommend it, especially I ended up listening to it on audio. But yeah, it was a good book. I don't feel like I have too much to say about it. And that was something that I kind of unexpectedly finished after we filmed our September wrap-up and before we actually left. So that's Blackout by various authors. The next one is where we get into the plane. So I had ordered a copy of La Bastarda by Trifonia, Melibea, Obono, translated by Lawrence Schimel from Montana Book Company, because this is one of the 3 books that was selected for the LGBTQ in translation read-along for the end of the year. There are 2 others, and I had fully expected to wait until the book came in. It's very short. It is 101 pages, and that actually, it looks like it includes the afterword. So yeah, the book itself is only 88 pages. So I finished this in like an hour on the plane because as I was leaving, somebody in the chat group, and I'll have the information about the chat group, pointed out that it is available as an ebook on Scribd. So I downloaded it, we got on the plane, and I just finished it. And I've already chatted with the people in the group about it, and I think a lot of us have the same basic opinion of the book, which is that it sets something up really interestingly. It throws you into the dynamic of this family, and it makes it really interesting. So the granddaughter, she's kind of an orphan. She's been being taken care of by her grandparents, and she is the title is about her. So she does not really fit in. And there are definitely gender and sexuality dynamics that are coming into play. She does not fit in with the life that they expect for her. And that is something that's interesting as well, because even like her grandmother is fighting for agency in her role. Like she's going along with what her role is, but she's fighting for agency within that because her husband brought in a second wife who now has kids. So there are really interesting things that get set up, and the uncle is being called out because he is living outside of the town with a man. People who are like possibly transgender, or at least playing with gender or gender fluid, pass through his house. People disapprove of that. They've been having some bad weather events lately, and that's being blamed on his failure to live up to his duty to have a child, to reproduce. And that is what's being blamed. So it sets up this really interesting story. The dynamics between the characters are really interesting. It's surprisingly funny, given that a lot of this sounds heavy. And then it just kind of ends. it doesn't ultimately do a lot with all of that setup. And all of us, the consensus seems to be that that's kind of the feeling of it. There are some people who don't enjoy the setup as much. I really enjoyed the introduction to this book. It just feels like it does a lot to set up a very interesting story and then doesn't do much with that. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I have a copy of it. And if you are interested, again, I will have the information for the LGBTQ in translation read along down below. And in the interest of not spending a lot of time on each book, because again, I'm running long, I am going to move on to the next thing, which is Love and Saffron by Kim Fay. I listened to this on audio. It's another novella. It was, I think, maybe 3 hours, and we had a long layover in Paris on the way over. So I did manage to sleep on the plane, which is unusual for me. And that actually helped us beat jet lag, which was a huge win going in that direction. It's been harder coming back. But we had a big layover in Paris, and that's where I actually listened to the biggest chunk of Love and Saffron. Adorable book. I really loved it. So it is mostly an epistolary novel, but not completely. It takes the form of letters, again, for the most part, between two women in the 1960s. Joan is a young 20-something woman who is starting out a writing career. She sends a letter to Imogen, who lives in the Seattle area, and writes for sort of like a wilderness magazine. Joan is sort of transitioning into becoming a food writer as the book goes along. She's a big foodie, and she sends Imogen a gift of saffron in her letter. And this prompts them, they start sending each other letters back and forth, and they forge this really unexpected and profound friendship. And it's particularly interesting because it talks about the ways in which food can create and cement relationships, the way it can be tied to adventure. Imogen has not been a very experimental or adventurous eater in the past, and her life just gets opened up to a whole avenue of food as exploration, and her life opens up because of this friendship. It's really beautiful and well rendered. Of course, events in history happen. As they write letters back and forth, they comment on the assassination of JFK and their complicated feelings about it and the feelings of grief that they have. They move through milestones in their lives, and it is a very sweet book. I am someone who really has come around. I was a very picky eater growing up, and as I became an adult, I started branching out and exploring more. And then since I have been with Joel, I have really come to understand that food can be an expression of love. And sharing food with a person can be a form of sharing yourself. It's also the ultimate form of care. If you feed someone, you are essentially giving them life. And this book really understands that and ties it to friendship in a very interesting way, and I would absolutely recommend it. It's a short book. Again, it was like 3 hours, maybe a little more, and I am just a big fan. So it was really sweet. So then, while we were in Italy, I got no reading done. Once we were in Italy, we were running, walking, exploring, napping, all of that fun stuff, eating, wow. So I didn't get a lot of any reading done. So I had a little bit of trouble on the way back, less success, even though I didn't sleep as well as I did the way out. And part of that is that I started in another book. Let's talk about the other book first, actually. So I started A Merry Little Meet Cute by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone. And I thought it would be fun because it's a holiday rom-com. And if you follow along, you know that is my thing. That's my jam. I am all about it. And it was particularly interesting because there's a bit of a twist in it. You know, holiday romances tend to be kind of a little conservative. They can be, certainly. They are wholesome, and the protagonist, or the female protagonist of this, is a sex worker. She has sort of like an OnlyFans, but it's not an OnlyFans. It's called like Closet Door account, and she does do porn. And the male protagonist is a former boy band member. But what's interesting is, like, he's supposed to be the bad boy, but he's not. He's like a misunderstood bad boy. It was all an act. He's actually deeply caring of his mother and all that. You can tell I didn't really enjoy this book. So it's trying so hard, and you can feel the effort on every single page to be cute, to be sex positive, to be fun. I love the idea of a sex positive rom-com, especially a holiday one, because that's my thing. And, you know, it's just trying so hard. perfect example where I started really getting frustrated with the book. So at one point, B, the female protagonist, something good happens. And she says, oh, it's so satisfying. Like when your emergency stash of lube comes in handy. It's like, okay, I am not a prude, but I also really need you to calm down. And I guess the blessing or the curse of being on a plane was that I don't really remember much of anything from the middle. I did skip a portion of the middle. I almost DNF'd it on the plane. I decided to loop back and finish it. Was it worth it? Not really. But I did finish it. So that's that. And part of why I didn't really finish anything on the plane on the way back but I spent a lot of time kind of fighting with this one, and I should have just pivoted, which I eventually did. And here we have another break. So it's been like 30 to 35 minutes since the last comment, and I think I was just about to start talking about the next book that I did finish. I started it on the plane, finished it when we got home. It is Winter Love by Han Suyin. So La Bastarda and this are the ones that my in-laws happened to bring over from Montana Book Company. So here it is. This book caught my attention because it's another novella. I'm apparently really into novellas lately. Caught my attention because it is described as a story about a love affair between two women during World War II, and it deals with austerity and the relationship between them. That is what caught my attention. I listened to it, and when I finished, I was really intrigued. I enjoyed it. It's kind of like, it's a messy relationship. These are complicated characters. I enjoyed it. It definitely gave me like Patricia Highsmith, Carol, or The Price of Salt. The Price of Salt is the original title of the book, and then nowadays it's more commonly called Carol because the movie took that title. Anyway, it was giving me that vibe because that book really reflects a complicated relationship between two women that are complicated. Like sometimes they fight and their relationship is a little bit messy, but they come back together, and that is kind of what you get in this book. The protagonist frequently lashes out, gets angry, and tries to punish the people that she loves in her sphere. And what the book does that in a really interesting way. Like you can clearly see that it's not because she doesn't care. It's not that she doesn't love people. It's that she has been through a lot. Part of it is, and it's interesting that the book deals with the austerity of World War II. There's a really interesting parallel between the austerity measures that you have to live with during World War II in the UK and the austerity that you have to live with if you are someone who is not of a sort of mainstream acceptable sexuality, and the things that you have to compromise and give up, and how you can feel alienated from yourself, and you can feel like that is unfair, and you can feel angry and hostile toward the world and even people you love. So the other woman who's in this love affair is actually married to a man. So complicated. And it's a really good story. I really enjoyed it. The thing that really kicked it up a notch for me is that when the audiobook ended, it does the, thank you for listening to this audiobook. I'm this person. And then it does like the copyright information. And it said, copyright Han Suyin, 1962. And my, the emoji of the mind blown, that was me in that moment, because nothing in the description of the book had mentioned that this was an older book. I'm not familiar with Han Suyin, so I didn't realize. Han Suyin is the woman who wrote A Many Splendored Thing, about a memoir of her love affair with a soldier, which was turned into the movie Love is a Many Splendored Thing. I didn't know that's who this was. I had no idea. I genuinely thought this was a contemporary novel set in World War II. It's a 1962 novel set in World War II. Like, what? Another level. It was just so immediately upon that, I was hearing that, I was like, I need a copy of this book. I already really liked it, but that was where I was like, I need a copy of this book. So I called Montana Book Company. They had it in stock. Here it is. And this cover is a little annoying because you can see it's super shiny. It's also going to get very fingerprinted. Spoiler alert for my October book haul for both of these, but I'll talk about them now. Actually, it's not too fingerprinty. That's pretty good, but it is very shiny. I'll talk more about the edition in my book haul when I do it, but I loved this book, and I'm very happy that I have it in my library. And just knowing that it was published in 1962 really amped it up for me. Big fan of this book. happy to have it in my library and talk more about it. It's funny that the fact that it was published in 1962 is really what drew me into like having to have a copy in my library as opposed to just really enjoying the book and talking about it. But it's also interesting that I went into it thinking that it was a contemporary book, and the only thing that told me it wasn't was the copyright date. And I think that also lends itself to a sort of timelessness and the fact that this really could be something that was written and published today. And I would definitely recommend it. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Again, it's a very short book. So I started that on the plane and finished it once we got back. Let me pull up my list and see what else we have to talk about. Okay, so there's only one other book that I finished since the last time we talked, and that is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. And I feel like there's too much to talk about. It's a difficult book. It's a little messy. This is on the shortlist for the National Book Award. I didn't manage to do a reaction to that while I was traveling, but it did make the shortlist, and I think it's potentially a good contender for the Pulitzer. We'll see. It's a very good and interesting book. It's a little bit messy. It deals with sort of multiple storylines in Vacaville, Indiana. It deals with poverty, religion, the foster care system, life, death, alienation, depression. It does a lot of things. And definitely if religion is, I know people have commented in the past and said that they can't really deal with books that have religious themes, so this would not be a book for you. The protagonist, in as much as there is one, is a young 18-year-old girl named Blondine, Blondine is not her real name. She sort of adopted it. She's a foster kid who lives with three other kids, foster kids who have aged out of the system. The others are all boys. They're all quietly in love with Blondine and not so quietly obsessed with her in some other ways. And her journey is, so Blondine is the name of a mystic. She's obsessed with mystics, and that's where some of the religious elements come in. And she is someone who has been damaged by the world, disappointed by the world, and at the point where she's at, she really just wants there to be grace. She wants evidence of grace. And the book also really deals with the idea of the sort of point-counterpoint things, the contradictions of the world, how there can be bliss in suffering, how there can be transcendence in despair. And it does all of that in really interesting ways. Again, there are elements of the book that are a little messy. It's a very difficult book to get into in the first place. I listened to the audio, and Tess Gunty actually reads a portion of it. I think she's the person who reads the majority of it, and her voice almost sounds bored. And that does mean that it takes a little bit to get into the book. What I come around to on that is that the book has a sort of listless energy, but it very much starts to feel like the listlessness of depression. If you have ever been depressed in your life, you know that it's very hard to be energetic about anything. Sometimes you don't even really notice you're depressed, you just feel bored all the time. So it has that sort of energy. And there's also a little sheen of anger that sort of picks up. And there are a lot of characters, potentially too many characters. Some of them have more relevance than others. There's also a new mother who lives in this apartment complex. The complex is called La Lapinière, which, I hope I said that correctly. I may have gotten it wrong. I don't speak French. Is French for the Rabbit Hutch, I believe. So it's an affordable housing complex in Vacaville. Vacaville is so it's also really heavily about America and the promise and the economic waves and depression and the ways in which the American dream is out of reach and taken away and taken advantage of by certain people. So this town was essentially built on a car plant. The car plant is no longer there, and the town has been depressed ever since. So depression again, and it's all really interesting. And this affordable housing complex, it also deals with the person who started it in this really pretentious way, named it with this highfalutin, really elaborate, prestigious sounding name that ultimately means nothing to the people who live there. It's just as if you're bringing glamour to their lives or pretending you're bringing glamour to their lives, but you're not doing anything for them. Ultimately, you're just providing affordable housing. And Yeah, and the people who live there go through. There's a couple who is, I think, newly married, but they're definitely new parents. The mother is struggling because, on the one hand, she's happy, but she is struggling with postpartum depression. She's afraid of her child's eyes, and she doesn't know how to tell her husband this. There's another plot where there is a sort of classic sitcom in the world of the book, and the child star of that, it was an old woman, and she died, and her son gets into the story. So again, it's a messy book. It's a little too sprawling in some ways, but it does a lot of really interesting things. So as much as I call it a bit of a messy book, this is definitely a book I'm going to be dissecting and thinking about for a long time. And part of it is the tone and the feel of the book and what it does. And a lot of it is also what it says. I think it does a lot of really interesting things, again, about all of the different contradictions, how you can be angry and cynical and shut the world out, but also really want it to surprise you. And that's not a specific not as much as like the fact that there is bliss in pain, and you can be despair and transcend at the same time. And of course, those do have religious connotations, but I am going to be thinking about this book a lot. And I feel like for timing purposes, I should leave it at that. But there's more to say. Maybe in my monthly wrap up, I'll try to collect thoughts a little more and be coherent about it, because I think there's a lot to say about this book, and hopefully I'll have a little more time to do it. So what am I doing? I started an audio called They by Kay Dick, another book from I think this one is from 1977, and it's sort of a forgotten classic. It was published and like immediately forgotten. I picked it up because Halloween vibes, and it's also short. It's like 2 hours, so I'm almost done. I think I have 45 minutes left in it, so I could be done with it today, but I'll talk about it next week. It's fitting the Halloween vibes that I need, and I'm actually going to use it for my Montana Book Company reading challenge for 2022 because I needed something for the prompt. This dystopia or apocalyptic book feels too real, and it fits. So it's creepy and dystopia and feels too real. So it kind of plays with gender. You don't know the gender of the protagonist. I believe Kay Dick was a lesbian, so it's got a lot of LGBTQ plus elements in it, which I'm excited about. So I'll talk more about that one next week. Again, for timing purposes, I feel like I should just kind of leave it here. This has been a long one, but in my defense, there was a lot to talk about. I didn't get to talk about any of these books in previous Friday reads in this month. There was just a lot to catch up on. So I'm going to leave it at this and let you go. It's been a lot. And I hope you're doing well. I hope you have been enjoying your October so far. Let me know what you've been reading, watching, loving, all of that stuff in the comment section down below. I'll try to manage the flow of comments and get back to you. As always, I really do appreciate your time, and I appreciate your comments. I appreciate everything. So I'm going to work on adapting to the new reality of where my channel is at in terms of subscribers. It's a good problem ultimately, but it does require an adaptation, an evolution, whatever you want to call it. So I will work on that. And as always, again, I appreciate your time, your comments, your energy, positive, hopefully. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.